FromSoft games aren't exactly known for their clear-cut lore and definitive answers, but in a game like Elden Ring where so much of the story comes down to why X family member wants to kill X other family member, it helps to know exactly who is related to who and how. So because no official family tree exists, I'll be demonstrating using the state-of-the-art one that I've painstakingly put together myself. So to start us off, Elden Ring's family politics basically centre around 4 main people, those being Godfrey, Marika, Radagon and Rennala. Marika here is basically the queen/god/main antagonist of the Lands Between, and the whole lore and politics of the game centre around her. Any kids born to or adopted by her are considered demigods and instantly get main character syndrome by default. There's also this guy, Malekith. He's kinda cool, quite the aura farmer, and he's also supposedly Marika's half-brother, although the blood relation is dubious at best. So it's probably more accurate to say he's her government-issued manservant, as he's been tasked by the Greater Will to serve her unquestioningly, which 9 times out of 10 just involves him taking the fall for her shittily planned schemes. In the same boat as Malekith, we have Godfrey,
the first Elden Lord.
Godfrey was handpicked to be Queen Marika's husband because of his immense strength and unbridled alpha male energy. And when he wasn't busy making babies, he was usually sent off to go do some casual genociding. Speaking of babies, he and Marika only actually had 1 kid together, Godwyn, and if you say otherwise you'll be disappeared faster than that pair of mutated children that you definitely did not see being dragged kicking and screaming into the sewers. Okay, we'll talk about the Omen twins. So, there's a little discourse as to whether these guys or Godwyn were born first, but it doesn't really matter for the purposes of the video. What does matter is the fact that these two were born heavily cursed, bearing animalistic mutations and some stank-ass attitudes. For reasons I won't get into in this video, the Omen curse is seen as an extremely bad thing in the lore. Whether it was her own decision or she was convinced by Godfrey, she chose not to kill them outright and instead banished them to the shit-filled sewer system under the city. Morgott for his part stayed loyal to his mother despite the whole abandonment situation, and would one day rise up from the stinkhole to rule Lanedale in her absence. He also goes about the world under the alias of Margit the Fell in order to kill us graceless Tarnished to ensure the purity of the Golden Order. Ironically enough, he's also graceless, but we don't talk about that. But while Morgott was busy spawn camping Tarnished for the woman that made him into an orphan, his twin brother Mohg chose to give a big gnarly middle finger to Marika and ran away to go find a new mother. The Formless Mother, specifically. But Mohg isn't an Empyrean, he can't become the Formless Mother's vessel and so needs to find someone who can, and then marry them to become the not-so-Elden Lord. Enter Miquella, a half-brother of his and full-blooded Empyrean. So he snuck into the Halig tree when Malenia wasn't looking, and ran off with Miquella in tow, with the intention of incubating him into his final form. So now he spends his days inside of his pleasure palace, Mohg-lesting his younger brother and practicing his aura-farming techniques. Unlike Prince Andrew, Mohg actually was beating the allegations. Turns out Miquella actually used his mind control powers to make Mohg kidnap him. Now we'll come back to why Miquella wanted to be kidnapped later. But for now we're going to move over to Marika and Godfrey's non-Omen child. Godwyn the Golden is on the complete opposite side of the spectrum from his brothers. He was considered to be the perfect child, kind, handsome and endlessly charismatic. Basically the complete opposite of the Omens. Publicly, Marika called him her firstborn son and heir, although we'll get to why that's a massive lie later on. At some point, Lanedale found itself under attack by the ancient dragons, and Godwyn was the one who rose up to lead the defense against them. He killed this absolutely humongous fuck-off dragon and then negotiated a peace deal between the two sides. One ancient dragon, Lanciax, took on a human form and taught dragon incantations to the people of Lanedale as part of this peace deal. So the running theory here is that Godwyn and Lanciax got a bit freaky and had 1 or more kids together, and the lineage eventually trickled its way down to Godric the Grafted. There's also this guy Godfrey in there somewhere, but to be honest I have no clue where he actually fits into it all. Anyway, Godric here is walking proof that even a god's DNA isn't safe from going down the genetic gutter, as Godric is nothing like his ancestors. He's frail, weak, and horrifically ugly. During the Shattering, he was sent fleeing from Lanedale dressed as a woman and went to go set up shop in Limgrave. Fast forward and now he's lost his mind, babbling endlessly about his way cooler ancestors and how much he wants to follow in their footsteps and fuck dragons. It's a real shame to see Goatfree's bloodline get ruined like this, but before he could have any more kids he found himself being served up some pretty rough divorce papers on account of his dick going limp and being of no further use. Marika pulled a Marika, banished him from the lands between, and chose herself a new consort. Enter Radagon, the second Elden Lord and loyal champion of the Golden Order. The only problem being that Radagon already had a wife and kids. See, Radagon managed to bag himself the queen of this tiny little place called Liurnia. Her name is Rennala, and the only thing you need to know about her is that she's batshit fucking crazy. Now, there's a theory floating about that it was Marika who ordered Radagon to go seduce Rennala and marry her to end a war between the two factions, knowing that one day they'd both nope out of those marriages and get together anyway. Either way, that didn't stop Radagon from having 3 whole-ass kids that would go on to become known as the demigod stepchildren, the eldest of which being Radahn. Now, Radahn is said to be the strongest and kindest of the demigods, but despite that, half of his siblings seem to want him dead. He modelled his gym routine off of Mr. Olympia here, was trained to fight by his older brother Mesmer, and was also a gifted sorcerer, leading him to become exceptionally strong, even amongst the demigods. So for these things, his half-brother Miquella decided Radahn simply had to become his Elden Lord. He refused, of course, but being of Carian blood meant that moving of the stars guided his fate, and the writing was on the wall. Or rather, the sky. So instead of meekly resigning himself to a life of being Miquella's lapdog, he chose to instead master gravity magic, to the point where he could literally hold the stars in their place and halt his fate. So Miquella sent his twin sister Malenia, the only demigod that could rival Radahn, to go drag him kicking and screaming back to the altar. She failed, but she did manage to infect him with a pretty gnarly case of the clap, which was just itchy enough to distract him during a fight, meaning someone else could come along and finish the job. Now, his whole holding back the stars antics didn't just piss Miquella off, as his sister Ranni was actually relying on the stars too to guide her to her ultimate victory. And if we know anything about Ranni, it's that she isn't above killing a few close family members to get what she wants. She's the heir to the entirety of Liurnia and one of the most skilled wielders of sorcery in the world. Such is her constitution that the body we see in the game isn't actually hers, it's a puppet, and her real corpse is lying stone cold at the top of Liurnia's divine tower. See, Ranni was in on the plot to steal a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malekith, using it to Alt F4 her soul from her physical body and sever her connection to the Greater Will. Now would also be a good time to mention that she used that Shard of Death to murk Godwyn and cause the Shattering. So after clocking out of a shift of causing a metric fuckton of problems for everyone else, she could finally get onto her hobby of supplanting Marika's Golden Order. But as previously mentioned, there was one very tall and muscular problem with that, holding her fate in place because he didn't want to get married. So Ranni sends the Tarnished and her version of Malekith, Blaidd, to go sort Radahn out. Anyway, one thing leads to another, and now the player is getting married to Ranni's motionless corpse in some dank musty cave, and you become her Elden Lord. Or maybe her Night Lord? Anyway, those last two were pretty important to the lore, but now we're going to move on to a significantly more insignificant character, Rykard. Rykard supposedly assisted Ranni on the Night of Black Knives, although his actual contributions aren't really known. Other than that, we know he served as Praetor of the Golden Order, meaning it was his job to go and imprison all the non-believers and torture them to death. Pretty much the only thing he was good for, to be honest. He looked up to his elder brother Radahn, even having a portrait of him hanging in Volcano Manor, but could never quite match him. Eventually, in his search for power, he fed himself to a fucking massive snake, and now whatever's left of his mind acts like a child that's found its way into daddy's illegal substance drawer. Even still, he managed to bag himself a loving wife, which is not easy in the lands between, and she basically runs the show while Rykard sits in his room trying to fit a square block in a circular hole. Speaking of, these two some fucking how managed to have children. And I don't even think I want to know how in God's name that happened. All of the man-serpents in the manor are technically Rykard's kids, although the only one that actually has a name is Zarias. Quasimodo here doesn't really serve any importance to the lore, so with that we'll move back up the tree. So after Radagon took the kids and left to be wifed up by Marika, they naturally took the logical next step in their relationship, eternally merging their bodies, mushing themselves together to create some kinda weird ass hybrid of the two of them. But not before having a few more kids just for good measure. And the tree would lead you to believe they got pretty fucking busy, having 4 in total. Though we have reason to believe, and by that I mean all but a written statement from Miyazaki himself, that the first two, Mesmer and Melina, were actually born way before any of the other kids, meaning that Marika and Radagon have been getting it on in secret for a pretty fucking long time. So let's talk about Mesmer. He's the one who trained Radahn in the art of war, and if you're the guy who taught fucking Radahn to fight, then you must be pretty scary. Well, to be honest, the opposite is probably true. Sure, Mesmer is more than capable of inflicting pants-shitting amounts of terror during wartime. The Hornsent can testify to that. But he's also shown to be a rather kind soul when family is involved. He was described as being like an older brother to Radahn. I mean, they literally are brothers, but the fact that they needed to point that out just goes to show how shit the familial relations are between this lot. He also let Miquella pass through the Shadowkeep on his way to Enter Alim, and he didn't even have to get mind controlled. I'd go as far as to say he was a little too nice, as he couldn't seem to bring himself to tell R'hllana to fuck off. So yeah, there's one more character that I kinda forgot to mention earlier, and that's R'hllana. So R'hllana is actually R'nalla's twin sister. I never would have guessed. And all you really need to know about R'hllana is that she's got that fucking dog in her, bro. But not a normal kind of dog, it's more like a Jeffrey Epstein kind of dog, if you're picking up what I'm putting down here. There was also one other kid born around the same time as Mesmer, and that's Melina, although in the lore she's often referred to as the Gloam-Eyed Queen. You know, because of her gloam eye. She's described by Mesmer's kindling as bearing a vision of fire, which makes a whole lot of sense when you consider the fact that she set fire to the Erd Tree and buried Leyndell under a metric fuck ton of ash. It makes double sense when you also consider that she joined Ranni in stealing a fragment of the Rune of Death and created her own new type of fire capable of killing gods. At some point along the way she attacked and lost a fight to Uncle Malekith, but the fact that her lifeless corpse wasn't flung from the top of Farum Azula after that ordeal means she must be pretty damn tough, even if she doesn't look it. Alright, moving on to the kids Marika and Radagon had after getting officially married. The twin prodigies Miquella and Malenia. Although I have absolutely zero clue why they're called the twin prodigies because only one of them is of any actual use to anyone. The older brother Miquella is about as functionally worthless as they come, cursed with both eternal youth and eternal procrastination. Not unlike myself, to be honest. Yet Miquella is divinely incapable of finishing literally anything he starts, but that doesn't stop him from cooking up a new harebrained scheme more often than Ranni tries to have one of her siblings killed. He basically lives by the moniker, I believe, therefore I am. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, buddy, but just because I believe I'm a millionaire, it doesn't stop my bank account from saying negative 200. Unlike the average Joe Schmo, Miquella actually can make things happen just because he wants them to, owing to his ability to mind control anyone he comes into contact with. So when he sets his sights on godhood, it can only spell a shit time for everyone else. His first act was asking his half-brother Radahn to marry him, and by asking, I mean he decided that's what was happening. And as I mentioned earlier, when he got sibling zoned, he sent his twin sister Malenia to go kidnap the blushing bride-to-be. While this was happening, he also got himself kidnapped by Mohg, with the purpose of getting him killed and using his body for Radahn's soul. So, after both victims meet their end at the player's hand, he scoops up Radahn's soul and Mohg's malleable Omen corpse and fuses them together, creating his perfect Elden Lord. When we finally arrive at the scene of the most heinous crime since the Shattering, Miquella doesn't waste any time in declaring victory. But this is the motherfucking Tarnished he's talking to, and 100 deaths later we finally bring him down and free Radahn and Mohg from their joint suffering. Though at least these two were brought along for the ride, unlike his loyal twin sister who wasn't clued in on the whole plot and was left to rot in the Halig Tree. Literally. But the blade of Miquella doesn't need some useless shit like arms and legs to be a goated warrior, and unlike the others, she didn't need to be manipulated into being loyal. Probably. We don't actually know whether or not she's being mind-controlled by Miquella. Either way, she's unwaveringly loyal to him, and is almost definitely the reason he actually managed to get as far as he did. As I said though, her loyalty wasn't exactly repaid in kind. She was sent off to go and die in a fight against Radahn and then thrown away like a mouldy piece of fruit. And if that surprises you this far into the video, then you probably haven't been listening. One good thing to come out of all of this was everyone's favourite little fungus Millicent, and her 4 unimportant sisters, who were all born during her struggle with Radahn. Does that mean... Yeah, don't worry. These 5 are actually just fungal spores that flew out of Malenia's back when she bloomed and grew into fully cognizant human beings. With grace, apparently? Either way, this lot aren't very important. So that basically rounds out our family tree, although I want to quickly circle back to Miquella. As we mentioned before, bro was fiending for some of that Alabama-style country lovin'. And since he technically married both Mohg and Radahn, we can go ahead and draw a few lines here, and all of a sudden, our family tree looks a lot more like a family wreath. Ladies and gentlemen, George R.R. Martin does it again. So this family is a little dysfunctional to say the least, and that's left some of its members with less than desirable upbringings. So if you'd like to find out which of the demigods has had the shittiest life, why not check out my last video? I'll leave a link in the top right and in the description. So thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, feel free to leave a wee thumbs up, and with that, I'll see you next time.